So let's say a little bit more about knowledge. And I'm going to speak about one element that is quite an interesting part of knowledge itself. It is what you have heard it from the people of Tasawwuf, from the people of Marifa. They say knowledge of the self is knowledge of Allah. Now, this is something, the nature of which is almost it sounds bad. For how can it be that the knowledge of me, the creature, can be knowledge of Allah, the Absolute? And so let's try to examine and try to understand where all this comes from. For in understanding on the self, there is knowledge. In understanding who you are, there is knowledge, and there is knowledge of Allah in it. So in understanding what your position is, how your self exists, what is the self, you have an understanding of Allah. And the way of looking into this in a manner that it will allow us to follow step by steps is to go back to this thing we said at the beginning. Is Allah does not have a definition. Allah cannot be defined. Allah doesn't say in the Quran, and I am something. He speaks with a double negative. He says, I am not something. So we can define Allah by what he is not, but we cannot define him by what he is. He doesn't come and say, he doesn't give us a line. He says things about himself, the attributes. And we can say, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. And we are right on that, because he said that about himself. But it's not the definition in the nature of what we understand by a definition. A comprehensive understanding of all he is in comparison to something. And the reason is that he doesn't have anything that you can compare it with. He does not have comparison. So here is where we're becoming closer to the individual. Because it is how we place ourselves, how we understand ourselves, that knowledge of Allah comes into existence. Let me introduce this idea with an image. When somebody says, what is Allah? Or who is Allah? Or where is Allah? Or why is Allah? What is the answer? Muhammad, what is the answer if somebody says, who is Allah?
The question itself is an innovation.
So the answer is?
You cannot answer.
Well, I cannot answer. The question is wrong.
When?
If somebody, yeah, exactly. There's no what. Allah doesn't have a what, or where, or a how. But now, let's say that you answer the question. So you get carried away and you say, Allah is something, and where is he? And he is in here or there. And if you answer the question, what happened to that? What you answer, what happened to that thing that you answer? It's nothing to do with Allah. So if you manage to create a logical understanding of Allah, the result is not Allah, it's something else. So somebody that it creates a theology is not talking about Allah, it's talking about something else. This is what Heidegger has called, that when you inquire when you ask in the way of philosophy, he says the truth shies, it kind of goes away, goes the other way. It shies away from you. And when you say, what is Allah? And you answer, Allah shies away. It's like you are not the answer, whatever you come and that you rationally describe, nothing to do with Allah. What you create is the concept of Allah. So you have a concept of Allah. So if you say, for example, Allah is a big guy with a beard up in the sky, okay, go ahead. That you have a theology, you have logical, the logos of God, but that has nothing to do with God. So if you answer the question, if you manage to answer the question, you have completely failed. Completely failed. So the result of this is that the people of Arifa, they say Islam is not theological. Up until then, some people will agree, some people don't, but you can grasp the idea. But what is more shocking is when they carry on and they say, because Islam is not monotheistic or polytheistic or atheistic or theistic. And here's where the problem comes in. Because you go, and at least when I first came into the country, they showed me one of the texts that they were going to use to teach the children, and said Islam is a monotheistic religion, and I told them no. The Sufis, when they want to say this, they're very careful, and they say Allah is one without a number. So it's not a one just up in the sky. It's a one without a number. It's a one that it doesn't have a 2 or 3 or 4. It's not part of a sequence of a number. You understand the meaning of this? It's unique. Monotheistic, the moment you say monotheistic, then you say Islam is part of the monotheistic religions. Like Christianity and this and that, they are monotheistic, so Islam is one of the monotheistic religions. False. This labeling is theological, and we must completely reject any theological thesis. For the reason, the fundamental reason that Allah cannot be described with what, where, or how. That there is nothing logically that you can grasp. Because if you do, you are already in other than Allah. So this radical negation of rationality, when it comes to describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it tells something about us. This is where you start moving into the self, because then you realize, in order to grasp knowledge of Allah, the first thing that I have to do is that I have to know something about myself. I need to know something about knowledge. I need to know something about how I describe the world. So the first finger is pointed at you. And here is where knowledge of the self is knowledge of Allah. What it is necessary, what is required for you in order to attain a knowledge which is not rational, this is not the result of the answer, who, here, what. In other words, if that which is I call thinking, if I cannot think the way I've been taught to think, how am I supposed to think? If Heidegger says science doesn't think, then what is thinking? How do I know? Okay, and now we have got the first clue, because we said it's not the reason, it's the heart. You have to understand how do you relate to the world. And fear, love and fear are fundamental elements of how you approach reality. But then I go a little bit farther, and then I say to you, do you need more clothes? Are you cold?
No, I
That's good. Maybe the air conditioning is too. No? It's okay.
Yeah,
You're all right. It's a little bit cold?
No, don't.
You're all right. Okay, fine. The question is, how do we look into ourselves so that this brings about understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And here is where the secret lies, is slavery. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the person, the Muslim, as a slave of Allah. And here is where you have a grasp of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only in terms of the hierarchy, which is clear, but in terms of knowledge, which is my point, is only in reducing yourself to zero, to no attributes, that then you start grasping understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, what we originally said, knowledge of the self is knowledge of Allah. If you know what your position in the world is, only then you acquire knowledge of Allah. The condition of knowledge is not looking out, but looking in. In fact, not looking in this way, but knowing that Allah is looking at you. The condition of knowledge of Allah is knowing of yourself. Is the moment you understand your condition, then you can obtain knowledge of Allah. And there is, therefore, the dictum. Knowledge of the self is knowledge of Allah. And many of the books that you will find related to tasawwuf, you will find that either they are marifatullah, knowledge of Allah, or knowledge of the self, like the book our Shaykh wrote. Either way, you look at the context, it's exactly the same. Because the things that they are speaking about is knowledge of Allah. Now, what is the significance of this? The significance is how do we prepare ourselves in order to enter into the affairs of Islam. And here's the example which I want to conclude today's talk. Knowledge of the self, which is knowledge to Allah, now we want that to reflect upon the things that are happening in front of me, knowledge of the world. How do we now? How do we look at the matters of Medina al-Munawwara that we have spoken about before? How do we look at the question of riba? And it gives me understanding. It doesn't make me another pawn, but it gives me understanding. How do I look at the economic affairs? And that results in understanding, in knowledge. And the question is, again, knowledge of the self. In another word, it doesn't matter what you look at. It doesn't matter what you're looking at. The important thing is your own condition. So, here is something. The Sufis, they say, the knowledge, the condition of the self can be altered by makams. Now, the word makam. Now, this is a fundamental aspect of our affair. You learn more about the realities of the world the moment you change, you alter your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this relationship is affected by quantum leaps. It doesn't happen in a continuous form. It goes by like stairs. It goes this way, and then this way, and then this way, this one. Each one of these levels is a makam. It's a theory of quantum related to knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this, the condition that you acquire, the positioning that you acquire in each one of these makams is going to allow you to look at the world and see it differently. Okay? And why is that it's different? Because this is the very nature of human being. If you send 3 people to China, the famous story. 3 men went to China. The first one came and they said, it's full of thieves. And the second one came and he said, it's full of beautiful women. And the third one came and he said, it's full of people of knowledge. The 3 of them went to the same country and they saw 3 different things because the world is a mirror of yourself. Now, if knowledge of Allah is knowledge of the self, then I'm telling you, knowledge of the world is a mirror of yourself. What you want to see out there is a mirror of yourself. The problems that you see out there, they are your problems, not somebody else's. You see what is specific of you. That picture that you have of the world is you. That picture of the world is a mirror to yourself. And here is the issue again. Like we said, knowledge of Allah is knowledge of the self, you can say knowledge of the world is also knowledge of yourself. If you want to understand what is going on there, don't look out, look at yourself. The thing that needs to be altered in order to gain knowledge of the self is you. You have to alter the person that is making the inquiry. And instead of looking out, you have to start not just looking in, but knowing that you are looked upon. Now, from here, we're moving from the observer to being the observer. But I want to go just one step further in this analysis. And I want to bring you to the meaning of poetry. Now, this is, and I will end up here today. It's just that I want you to look into this thing because it's worth understanding. You know, the Arabs love poetry. I mean, perhaps more than anybody else. They have the Persians equally. We are people rich in poetry. And when you look at our literature in the old days, it's full of an enhancing and loving of the works of literature and poetry. Poetry at the heart of it. Now Heidegger says something very interesting. When he's faced with science doesn't think and he has to propose a different way of thinking that passes philosophy, he says, let's go back to before the Greeks. And what he says, what we had before is poetry. So he suggests poetry is the way of knowledge. And then he says, when he examines his philosophy, his sound way of thinking, he says, am I still a philosopher or not? Quite critically, Heidegger said, this is the end of philosophy, but I am still in, or have I really come out? And he said something quite interesting. He said, what I know is that from my knowledge, from this tradition of mine, which is philosophy, that I want to denounce, in order to obtain knowledge, you have to jump. And he said, he called this in the gap. There's no continuity. From this to knowledge, there's no continuity. Philosophy is not going to take it there. You have to jump. Amazing thing to say. There's no continuity. In other words, you have to go somewhere else. But the answer from me is very clear. It's Sufism, Islam. You have to go to the other side. You have to go and start thinking differently. But the only thing that he said that he could figure out that we can arrive to this other side is through poetry. And he says something very interesting. And this is where I will end. That poetry is the exercise of the elimination of the self. He said there is no art anymore. Why? Because everybody's saying what they feel. Because everybody's expressing themselves. Because everybody's telling what everybody else wants to hear. But the poet is only one that brings meaning to the words. The restoration of the meaning of the words. So it's a poet, a prophet, in fact. I mean, if you take this to the ultimate thing, the elimination of the self, well, the prophet is one that has no self. Allah spoke through him. He had no will. Allah spoke through him. And that doesn't mean that poetry has a continuity to prophethood. No. Not a chance. Again, here is another gap. As Allah chose the people that he spoke to. So a poet can never be. It doesn't matter how much he goes. There's Allah's intervention into this. But the suggestion here is the prophet is somebody who spoke the truth because he had no will. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke, Allah spoke. When Rasul sallallahu threw the sand, he said, you didn't throw, Allah threw. And here is where we have an understanding of knowledge by a different source. A source, the nature of which is not examination with the eye, but is poetry. And the poetry being an exercise of the elimination of the self. So in other words, you are speaking without the attributes of your time. Now think about this. We are people inside a temporary situation whereby, what is our task? How can we communicate? And Heidegger is saying through art, and you have to do it by poetry. And the key of the matter is the restoration of the meaning of the words. And that's what we did the first day. We are restoring the meaning of the words. We are restoring the meaning of the word riba. We are restoring the word dinar, dirham. We are doing poetry in the act of bringing back the meaning to the words. And we are doing it by putting ourselves outside our cultural context, our historicity. We are going away from everything that is normal. We are not speaking as a man of the 21st century, like we are aliens and we say, gold dinar. Gold dinar. You are free to choose. We are speaking languages that don't have to do with anything with the people here. If you do it from the culture, you will never come up to this. They will tell you an Islamic bank makes a lot of sense. So poetry seen as an act of the elimination of the self. Now if you look at the Sufis, Qasidas, what are the Qasidas? What is the result was written, but not in the prosaic. They wrote songs. They left everything in the form of metaphors. They used metaphors to describe the world. And the condition by which they eliminated is the elimination of the self. And I think this is where I end. Knowledge of the world, it doesn't come from observing the world. Knowledge of the world comes from understanding ourselves. And the process of understanding ourselves is a process of stripping yourself from the veils that they come from your own attributes, from everything, from your historicity, from your being a man of this world, from being part of this culture, from being part of your profession, from being who you are. Everything that makes you you, that is a veil. Eliminate them and reform it again. And in the process of unveiling is how you can speak poetry. This is how you can refer to the world. Then you can become valuable. That's how you can lead. And we finish here. Tomorrow we will continue with the other aspects of MUAMALAT. We will go more a little bit hands-on onto the different aspects of MUAMALAT, and we will leave the third and the fourth day. By the way, how is the timing for all of you tomorrow? Friday. Juma.
3.
3 better? 3?
There's a mosque nearby.
From 3 to 5 tomorrow, okay? And then how about Saturday or Sunday? Or we leave it, because I know some of you go to Kampung and stuff. So we go back Monday or Tuesday?
Yeah, we won't go back to Kampung this week.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer to continue?
Yeah, same time.
Continue Saturday.
We continue Saturday, Sunday, no issue?
Other people know from you.
Yeah.
Okay. You have no problem? Any one of you have problem? Continue Saturday, Sunday? Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
Yo tengo clase, pero le preguntaré a alguien que me pase la grabación.
I mean, ahora hablamos. Anybody else? No problem?
Yeah, we have to. Our flight is on the 13th.
Or 13, so Saturday, Sunday is better for you, right? To continue.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah.
So that's it. We continue. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, if you have any questions, let's do it now. I see you. You are so tired, all of you. So I'm going to leave you immediately. So, just a couple of questions and we go.
Did Heidegger become a Sufi?
You have to speak really loud.
Did Heidegger become a Sufi?
Did Heidegger become?
A Sufi.
No, unfortunately. I mean, if I would have met my Shaykh, it would have been quite an awesome meeting. No, he died at a time. He didn't have an encounter. I mean, it's sad. I think what proves to me is that there are within Europe, there are some people that they are longing for knowledge. Look, Nietzsche, that it was admired by Heidegger, he wrote, "War to Christianity to the end. Love and peace with Islam forever." Nietzsche, the one who said God is dead, which if you look into that, is an affirmation of the Christian God is dead. He's dead. In a cross, they kill him. You know, that's the idea of a God, dead. He's saying something else totally different. Heidegger says this is not an affirmation of an atheist. This is an affirmation of something who believes. But from the point of view of Christianity, he's the father of atheism. Nietzsche is something very interesting. And if you want to read Nietzsche, you read Heidegger. So again, Heidegger, is he Sufi? No. He didn't have an encounter. He never, and there was no, Islam was too weak. I mean, the image of the Turks, it would have been the closest to him. It wasn't an image that you say, wow, look at this Islam. It wasn't the Ottoman Empire. It was, the days of immigration. Turkey was broken down. So unfortunately, that encounter didn't happen. Allah will know. His philosophy has any value to us? This is a question that is worth asking. Why do we have to look at Heidegger? He's not a Muslim, therefore what? And I agree, he doesn't tell us anything about Islam, but he tells us about kufr. What the value for me of Heidegger is that he says to you, this is kufr. And when I read Heidegger, I had to do shahada again. I had to say to myself, my God, let's start again. Because I realized how much kufr I carry, how much in my way of thinking, I'm still thinking like a kafir. So Heidegger is not going to teach us about Islam, but he's going to teach us about kufr. And that's what he says. He says, this way of thinking that we call philosophy is kufr. That's what he's saying, basically. Forgetfulness of being is the opposite of knowledge. Right? It's worth reading it. I mean, if you really like, I have an amazing library. I love it. I mean, I love reading it. Any other question? One more. Neil.
You said something about scientific methodology, and I was thinking about the fact that maybe in epistemology they define the scientific knows how to define truth, but the methodology is wrong, because in this observer, can find subjectivity and objectivity. They always talk about subjectivity, and subjectivity is what is the way to the truth. No, can you think of it in this way?
All right. Well, no, subjectivity is not the way to truth. I mean, to look into knowledge of the self is not subjectivity. It is knowing that Allah is not how you look at yourself. It's how Allah is being observed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's something very different. Subject means that you are the center. It's the definition of subject and object. Here is me, the center of the world, and the object is the world, including me occasionally. And I look at the world and this is what I see. Now, what makes everything a little bit more confusing is the idea of subject-object and then subjectivity-objectivity. Objectivity is supposedly not to look at the matter out of my emotions. You know, for example, the suggestion from Cartesian thinking is that, well, the man has to have an intuition, and if I think whatever I see, that's it. But hold on a minute. You know, I will be in a good mood and a bad mood, and that doesn't work. So you need to fix it. And the fixing comes, blah, 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 with a number of people in between, but Kant, Immanuel Kant. He is the father of science. He's the creation of the method. He's the one that fixes science in the way that we understand it today. Now, what he invented is objectivity. He said, all the data that comes to you, you're going to just simply take it. You're going to just take everything valid. In order to be valid as data, it has to be filtered by objectivity. It has to be proven. Not everything that you feel about the world, you have to prove it. Numbers. And everything that we have to prove, it has to be analyzed. And analyzed especially mathematically. So it has to be proven by some mathematical object. It has to be able to be recreated in laboratory conditions. It has to be experienced, it has to be repeated. So there's a number of conditions in order to become objective. And that's why Heidegger, when he talks about Immanuel Kant, he has a beautiful book on the rationality on Kant. And he says, what Heidegger contributed is that before, the people before, they were having thoughts about the world. But when Kant came in, he made people have thoughts about our own thoughts about the world. So it's not that we became more grounded, we became more loonies. So instead of the world doesn't have any face anymore. Before, what you are studying is the data, the objective data. When an economist sits down in order to analyze the situation of the country, he's not interested in meeting the people of the country. He's looking at the statistics, because that is the objective data. That is what validates his argument. He's looking at the papers. He's not looking at the world. He's looking at the representation of the world. While thinking about the world is already a representation, this is a representation of a representation. So when science comes in and is validated by objectivity, it becomes even more mad than it was before. So it's like a balloon that is losing contact with the earth. You know, as if it were, it's just flowing a little bit more into the illusion world. So it becomes completely absurd when it comes to man, because we can afford in inverted commas naturally, the destruction of the world, but we cannot afford the slavery of mankind, because that's me. So when now we have arrived to a scientific understanding of society where man is seen as a number. They are not failing scientifically. It's not that they are not following the method. They are following perfectly the method. We have become the objective reality of their analysis. And the more precise they are, the more dehumanized we become. So to the extent that everything that matters at the end of the day is your consumption patterns, your statistical data. In other words, your data. You are data. You are information data. You are not human anymore. And that is seen in the eyes of scientific understanding as something progressive.
Actually, they say this. They said, we are data because the DNA is data, so...
Yeah, and the data and exactly anything. The only thing that it doesn't come into that picture is the heart, and the only thing that doesn't fit in that is love, and the thing that doesn't fit in there is the affairs of the heart, love, fear, and Allah of course doesn't exist. Since Allah cannot be defined in data, then it doesn't exist, and everything else that doesn't come into data doesn't exist. But look, the world is becoming bigger or narrower. It's becoming smaller. The world gets destroyed. Humans get destroyed. And that's what Heidegger says. Scientism, which is that kind of thinking, is dangerous. He doesn't say it's neutral. He says it's dangerous. It's dangerous to mankind, it's dangerous to nature. And we allow these loonies to continue this way, we have no planet Earth. In 1 century of rationalism, we nearly wipe it all out.
I have a second question, if it's possible. Is the dogma, or you say in English dogma?
Dogma, yeah, depending what you mean.
Is the dogma to not have the dogma? Is it
Yeah,
the dogma?
that's right. That's absolutely true. Our dogma is no dogma. The only dogma that exists is La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Certainty exists. It's not that we don't have something we believe in. It's that it's not man-made. There is a difference between building upon certainty or building upon opinion. Now here the distinction is something that comes out of your, what I think. I think that it doesn't mean anything. What matters is Allah says. That's what means something. And then knowledge is like, if you think about the central pillar and just start building concentric circles based on certainty, knowledge is based on certainty, not on opinion. It's the opposite of opinion. And so when we say La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, that is not an opinion. So you cannot say there is La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, but the United States has nuclear weapons. That doesn't fit in, you understand? It doesn't enter into the same equation. As we will see tomorrow, using this new methodology, we will be able to see things that nobody else can see. And you are so tired, I'm going to send you all back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's say Fatiha just to say goodbye. بسر وبركاته بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين